Make sure I've got sound.
Somebody's pulling up in front.
Oh, all right.
I don't care. I don't care.
Okay.
No, I'm just on the dog.
All right. So I don't know if I can turn this way a little bit. Can you see?
Yeah, I mean, it's on to my eye, but I'm good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so we're out here in Pelham, and we were just talking a little bit about the protest that's going on here today. Do you want to talk about why you came out?
Yeah, absolutely. Always gets caught in between wanting to talk about this because people need to hear the why and the how and all of that. People get lost in history, and believe American propaganda, believe what we're told in our textbooks and in our shitty ass schools, right? So I think it's important. It's hard to talk about, right? Because while we're talking, it's raining in Gaza. People are being bombed while it's raining, and there's not clean drinking water, right? So, as we were talking about, this is a project, right? Just like NYCha housing, just like New York City public schools, and every other institution you can think of in this country, right? It's a project. They set us up. It's like the ghettos, right? Like the Jewish ghettos people used to live in. It's demoralizing, right? But if we give up, then they win by default. And there's an old saying, I forget, maybe Malcolm X said it, whoever, if you are not careful, they'll kill you and say that you wanted it, right? And Malcolm X also, to go back to him, talked about Zionism being a white supremacist ideological project, right? Just like all of these other projects are. How are our kids going to grow up? Who are we going to turn into? Being warmongers and not good neighbors, right? So all of these things are connected, and that's what people here have been saying, and I've been hearing my entire life, to make the connections. My mother, who was one of the first people to speak here today, Carol, she's been a professor, adjunct professor, not making nothing, right, for her whole life, just so she can teach people about what capitalism does, what Zionism does. It kills our spirit, our soul, right? But really making the connections between why CUNY's not free and why Palestine's not free. So, it's important, obviously, to keep coming out here and doing this, to have the hard conversations with people. I work for an organization who's taken a stance, right? They have stood with Israel. And I walk to work every day, or take the train to work every day, with my Palestine flag attached to my book bag. And when I get to work, I have to put it in my drawer, right? Because I'm not allowed to be who I am in capitalism. They decide who you are and what you stand for. And the minute I walk out of my office building, I fly my flag, and I'm ready to have that conversation with anybody who wants to, anybody that wants to learn. If somebody just wants to fight about it, I'll still talk to you, right? Because it's important. It's important for us to make connections with each other, and connections about how we make a free, better world.
A car coming through here. There's a car.
Mm-hmm. Come on.
There's a car.
This is my mother, by the way.
Hi, nice to meet you. I was talking with your daughter on my YouTube channel.
Oh.
I have a reporting channel. Okay, we gotta let this car through.
Maybe he's the Chancellor and he wants to get back into his house.
He's definitely not the Chancellor. The Chancellor has a chauffeur.
Okay.
So,
what can you explain what the connection you're drawing is? You're talking about the connection between CUNY and Palestine.
Right.
What is the connection that you're making?
So, it's complex, but it's also very simple, right? There's not enough money for good education. Teachers, when I was growing up, I went to school in Harlem. My teachers paid for supplies. because they couldn't earn enough. Just like this young lady was saying, she didn't have enough money to pay her internet. This is how it works. And it's set up that way deliberately so that it dumbs us down, right? And then we're only swimming upstream, fighting for just a little bit, that we don't look at the broader picture of what's happening, right? Don't look at the broader picture that we're all being flushed down the toilet. Palestine is occupied territory in 2023, right? The streets of the Bronx, occupied territory. I opened my window last night. Cops are across the street, posted up. They've been there for days, just posted up, waiting to pick somebody off, waiting to find the littlest thing wrong so that they can persecute somebody. And this is how it works in my neighborhood. Why? Because I live across the street from public housing, NYCha. So they're told to be overseers, to gentrify the area over time. This is what they've been doing to the Bronx. This is what they've been doing to the entire New York, right? Getting people out so they can move new people in. What is happening in Gaza? What is happening in Israel? Same thing. Settlers coming in, throwing people out, taking over their homes. They don't have to work for anything. They don't have to pay for anything, right? Just throw them out of there. And that's the same thing that's happening. So in where I live in the Bronx, some years ago, there was like a conspiracy. They called it the Bronx 125, something like that, where in the middle of the night, they came in and they raided the housing projects. They set up a conspiracy indictment. Anybody who lives in the projects knows you're friends with everybody who lives in the projects. It just is what it is. It doesn't matter if they sell drugs or they're a teacher or whatever it is they do. You live in the projects, right? So you're friends. You're friends on Facebook. You hit a like. So they created this thing so that they could lock up 125 people in the middle of the night and throw them in jail. What's the point? Well, then they get people out of public housing, and then they get people out of the neighborhood, and now you get to build up the neighborhood, right, and move new whiter people in, right, that are going to pay more to live there. So that sounds exactly like what's happening in Israel. Right? You come in, settle the place, kick somebody out, then you don't even have to work for it, right? You don't have to work to pay that Palestinian family to move out. And that's the same thing that happens with gentrification, right? You set up some scheme where somebody falls into it, however it is, right? Like the example of the Bronx 125. And you force people, because if you have a case in NYCha, they can throw you out. They throw your family out. So while it doesn't look the same to everybody, it's not cookie cutter, right? We understand the connections, we understand the microaggressions, right? And what the goal is for the powers that be, and that is to keep us all dumb and keep us all fighting with each other about things that don't actually matter, so they can flush us all down the toilet.
So what would you like to see happen?
Overall?
What is the positive vision for Palestine and for the Bronx, for the whole system that you're critiquing?
From Palestine to Mexico, records to Guantanamo, all the walls got to go, right? So
what does that mean to you? What will that look like?
That means a free world where people can decide what works for them, whether it's not taking all the well water or all the groundwater out of California to make cashews or something stupid, right? It's not having 50 million types of cars so that people can have preferences of cars, right? We control the means of production. We should decide what is produced. So again, from the Bronx to Palestine to Mexico, having the people who run the factories, who get up and are the laborers every day, decide what it is that we need, what works for our societies and what doesn't work for our societies. And that can be an overall and community-based, right? Because what you want in your community is not necessarily what I want in my community, but it should all be somewhat uniform in that people have basic rights. Right to live, right to eat, right to education, free education, right? A free CUNY. when I was a kid, I remember one of my earliest memories was being on my father's shoulders at City College when the students had locked themselves in the administration building because they were fighting budget cuts. So the ideal is, right, like, how do I answer your question? It's really very hard to, because it's so broad of a question. What do I want to see in Palestine? I want to see a free Palestine. I want to see not an apartheid state. Does that mean that all the Jews should jump into the river? No, that whole is bullshit, right? That's not what the saying means. The saying is that in 2023 we should not live in an apartheid state. In 2023 we should not have erected lights in front of my house watching the people who live in the projects. Freedom, right? Freedom to choose the right way.
So you're talking about, you were talking about the from the river to the sea chant, right? And different people have a lot of different interpretations of that. So your interpretation is, you're saying it, kind of like a one state solution. Is that what is your interpretation of that? Phrase?
It means that from the water to the water, anybody who lives there should not be in occupied territory. So if you're Palestinian, you shouldn't have to take a different road or wear a patch or have a different license plate that makes you a lesser citizen, right? Like the Jim Crow South or apartheid South Africa, right? That shit should not exist in 2023 at all. So yeah, one state solution should be a free Palestine. There should be no Israel. It should have never existed. That's what we were talking about in the beginning. This was a bad project. They tried to see, it's like throw some shit at the wall and see what sticks. It stuck too long. So a free, democratic society where everybody can live together, much like what was happening before the organized state of Israel, right? What was going on in Palestine prior to that? Jews and Christians and Muslims living together, multicultural, multifaceted, right? All of that. We don't have to imagine it. People remember it, right?
Well, wasn't it kind of controlled by a series of empires? There was the British Mandate, and then there was the Ottoman Empire.
So is the whole world, right? So if we can imagine a place that has that spirit of everybody living together and all that, but not being controlled by the empires.
Well, socialism.
Did you want to jump in?
Yes, please.
See what you find out.
Okay.
That's the word. Socialism.
No, socialism.
Socialism, yeah.
Yeah.
But what is the vision for socialism now? I think when a lot of people hear socialism, they think about, I don't know, China, they think about the Soviet Union, maybe Cuba. Like, what is the vision for, what would it look like if there was a socialist movement that succeeded in the Middle East, for example?
Well, the only way that people are going to succeed is with the Socialist Federation of the Middle East. So it means not only Jews and Palestinians fighting for a socialist society, but in all of the surrounding states, the Arab states have to overthrow their own emirs and the rulers, Sisi and all of those people, to set up a socialist society in those countries as well. Otherwise, I think it's sort of utopian to think that anything could be of lasting peace in Palestine. It's going to have to be a socialist federation of the entire Middle East for that to exist.
There's a car coming behind you.
Right. Nothing changed in Iraq. Look at Iraq.
Do you think that there's a political movement that would bring that about in the Middle East?
Well, there was in 2011. The problem is that the leaderships of all the anti-establishments were not people who fought for socialism. They fought for democracy and for opening up their society and good things. But if you don't overthrow the state, then you don't get to replace it with a society that you want to see. And the only society that's going to be functioning and livable and civilized and humane is going to be a communist society, which means not China, not Cuba, not any of those other places that call themselves communist, but a society where workers control internationally. And so when they control internationally, then we internationally as workers make decisions what gets produced, where it gets produced. All those kinds of issues are not national issues, and nationalism is fake. It's something set up by the imperialists. You know, those countries in the Middle East were never nations. Those countries in Africa weren't nations. They were set up because they served the interests of the imperialists. And so all the workers where there are, and there are workers everywhere, need to get together to overthrow their own states and set up a society where workers make decisions collaboratively, internationally.
So I think that the misgiving, if you will, that people have about that kind of government, that kind of political structure, is that you end up with a centralized government power. You don't have local control, and you get, you have to have some body that is, regulating the economy, maybe on behalf of workers, but you end up taking power actually out of the hands of the people.
Well, we as communists, and I'm a communist, believe in councils and Soviets, where until the day that we end up with communism, where there's scarcity, where everybody is involved politically and socially, we think that those kinds of organizations should be elected by workers, and that those Soviets and councils will get together millions of workers to make those kinds of decisions. And if the state clamps down, the state should only exist temporarily to squash the right wing that's going to want to overthrow that. But then the state needs to disappear. And that's what Lenin wrote in State and Revolution. He said, as soon as we involve more and more and more of the workers, which is our intention as communists, then we don't need a state anymore. Then we have human beings.
And that would go differently than it did for, the Soviet Union. They had the idea of having Soviets.
And that was the one revolution that I supported, but you had 21 countries that intervened after the revolution and just destroyed everything, right? They were thrown back before World War I, the economy. And through that, Stalin took power. And Stalin clamped down on anything that had to do with democracy or socialism or all of that, and which is why we see those countries that mimic the Soviet Union as behaving in the same way. So I'm for getting rid of the state by really putting workers into power.
Would you call your position more of a Trotskyite position?
I'm a Trotskyist.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was picking up, yeah.
I'm definitely a Trotskyist.
All right.
So we're for permanent revolution.
How are you getting back to
I'm walking with you guys. Okay. So we're going to head back to the train. As we're going back, is there anything about this protest here today that you wanted to leave people with?
Well, it was wonderful, actually. Although I've been to bigger ones, but it was great because people were able to speak and collectively talk about what was necessary, even though there wasn't any, political, philosophy or something other than the fact that we all are for freedom. But it's the beginning of a dialogue, and I'm a delegate in my union, and I put a resolution on the floor that almost nobody supported. It was about getting rid of having the AFL-CIO not support the genocide, because the AFL-CIO gives a lot of money to Israel. And so I think that this and that are the beginnings of a discussion of a new world. And the Palestinian woman who I was talking to said, oh, everything is going to go back after the bombing stops. And I said, I think this is a really different time, because people are becoming really disgruntled and angry about the state of the world. And so I think the time is open for us to now begin to really talk about the greater I mean, not that Palestine isn't the most pressing, but the greater issues of who controls and who supports the controllers and what kind of society we want to see. So I feel heartened by, what's the future of this, and the fact that it was, such a wonderful day.
It's a beautiful day out.
It's a beautiful day.
All right. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to leave people with?
No, just reiterating what she said, and that, so I heard somebody say, or actually Biden had said something like, if Israel didn't exist, they would have to create it, right? So past this issue, it's the broader issue of, why is it okay to oppress this place? Why is it okay to oppress us and other people? So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for talking with
Thank
me.
Okay,
you. What's
thank
your
you.
name?
Amy.
Amy. Nice to meet you.
What's your YouTube channel?
I got the.
Oh, you got the information?
Let me just